You guys have been around for nearly 2 decades. You've never closed a store and 1.7 million average unit volume over your 20 locations. That is absolutely insane for salads.
We really keep values and family values at the core of everything that we do. Just showing up for your staff, showing up for your community, your guests.
What you eat right now is going to affect how you feel several hours later.
We want to make sure that we do the staples well. We always like to say at salad houses, you got a friend in me.
How much easier is that to remarket to them when they're a loyalty member, which obviously goes to kind of snowball and all this effect. Tim, super excited to have you today and talk about Salad House. This is such a cool brand. If you see my little green light back here, you know, I'm representing the Salad House. So you guys have been around for nearly 2 decades, 19 years, 8 years in business. You've never closed a store, and get this, 1.7 million average unit volume over your 20 locations. That is absolutely insane for salads. So tell me what you guys are doing. What do you attribute this? How are you guys finding the best franchisees?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that we approach things, and I joined on 8 years ago. Maybe I have some part in that. No, but I digress. The team is really, really great. Look, we really keep values and family values at the core of everything that we do. Joey Chaffee, founder of our organization, really is someone that was inspired to create Salad House, not because he was sitting in a college room and had to do some sort of assignment for a professor and create a business plan. He did it really to create a solution for his family and for the community that he lived in. And so family is always at the root of everything that we do. And when we look at in franchising, we know that when we go into a partnership with someone and we bring someone into our organization, that we have to make sure there's some shared values there. And so, with our core values, we have a couple of things that we keep really, really important to us. We have 4 of them. So to rip through our core values, one of them is to keep chopping. In fact, a lot of us wear bands that say keep chopping, or if it's this way or it's that way, I'm
Yeah,
not really sure.
that's
But
cool.
for us, that's not just a saying, that's an energy, that's an approach. It's a reminder to stay resilient and stay consistent in this business. In the restaurant industry, can be tough at times, but with the systems and with the support of a franchise, it certainly makes success more obtainable. So just showing up for your staff, showing up for your community, your guests. That's one thing that we look for when we partner with someone. We look for someone who we know is resilient. We know that they're consistent, and that they're willing to show up during, potentially some tough times. When you launch a restaurant, or you launch any business for that matter, it's always a grind. And so therefore, if we don't have someone that's willing to commit to and wants to compete in that way, then we know that potentially might not be, someone that we would value in our organization, because it just might work. And then from the next perspective, look, like food, we look at food as fuel, right? And so to continue to play off energy, we say keep chopping is an energy. We know that our food brings energy. And when you're in a healthy space, you have to make people feel good. And we know that we do. And the way that we can do that is by really serving communities. And when we talk about serving communities, communities could be teams, they could be corporate teams, they could be little league teams. And so one of the things that we have to do is we know that we're not just serving food in that moment, but we're fueling other moments. Because when you eat food, you want it to feel good, and you want it to inspire you to go out and either do well in your workplace, show up for your kids in a great way. And so therefore, when we serve a meal, we want people who are truly passionate about serving communities, and so that they understand that once they serve that meal, and it's digested by and it's taken in by that guest, that they're going to go off and they have goals that they want to accomplish, and we want to play a small part in helping them chase down their goals. And so that's the next thing, for us, is that we just don't want to see people saying, all right, we want to exchange this food for this fee and now we made money. That's
Yeah,
not what we want.
I love focusing on, yeah, we're not just fueling them now, because what you eat right now is going to affect how you feel several hours later. And we've all experienced that. You eat junk, you feel like junk. You eat
Yeah.
something good and it does. I love that. You're like, yeah, I want to give fuel to energize people to do the things that they want to do. Because when you're eating donuts or cookies, right? You can't do that. Okay, so those are the first two core values, and you said there's
But
four.
there's a time and place for everything. But we know in our business, primarily a lunch business, and weekend business, we know that a lot of people are out there and they want to go crush a workout. They want to go maybe crush their opponent in a game, or they really just want to do really, really well in their workplace. And so we know that, sometimes when people leave or go to a corporate lunch and they eat 3 or 4 slices of pizza and they come back to their desk, they're potentially falling asleep and maybe they can't execute on all the goals that they want, and they throw their day away. We don't want to be a part of that. There's a time and place for that. But for Salad House, that's why we have such good retention. We have people coming back to us. We have so many regulars that make us a part of their no, their weekly schedule, which is really, really amazing. And to kind of go with moments, the next thing we like to say, and this is one of Joey's expressions, our founders, we want to make people smile through their stomachs. And so again, we want franchisees and we want people in our organization, whether they're on our corporate team or they're our franchisee, we want people to serve food again that they feel like will make them happy and make them excited. We have a saying is like, healthy food or healthy eating doesn't have to always be so serious. And I think a lot of times when we look into healthy food space, the first question is, what are your micros? What are your macros? And in a way, like, our goal is really just to fuel healthier choices. And then you feel good about making those healthier choices. I read this book once called The Motivation Myth, and it's like a lot of people sit around waiting for this one thing to inspire them and then to make this big drastic change. But I think, the research shows that we know that life doesn't really happen that way all the time. It's sometimes just a series of good decisions that seem to snowball in a positive way for you. And then before you know it, you've made some really good, healthy changes and routines. And so in that way, we also say with a smile is the opposite of kind of being serious, right? And so healthy food doesn't always have to be so serious. And it isn't at Salad House.
I love that. So keep chopping, food that fuels.
Definitely.
Um, well, I know we
Smile
just
through your stomach.
smile through your stomach. Okay, and then what are we at for the last one?
The last one is we want to make sure that we do the staples well. And what we mean by that is, sometimes we can get caught up chasing maybe trends, or we can get caught up in some things that are not as important. But we know that in this business, in hospitality, if you do the staples well, then you have a really good chance at success. And the reason why that's sort of the last one, because it's a culmination of all the others. If we just make people feel good about the food that they eat, and we do it obviously in an authentic way, then we know that we have a really great, chance at being successful in the market and against our competitors.
And 19 years in, you guys, you guys have definitely proven it. And I love right at the beginning, you're going straight to core values. And I've had two conversations already today, on like the importance of core values. And when you're making a decision, if you could base them off of your core values rather than, usually it's just like, what do we think is going to make us more money? Right. But is that really what we're after? Or are we after, alignment? So I love right at the beginning, you're going straight to the core values. Like, that's why we look for franchisees that meet this. And then you could fast forward, you guys have been doing it for 8 years, and your bottom franchisee made $1 million according to your FDD. And it's like, that's really cool. So Tim, how did you get involved? What were you doing before, and how does that relate to your position right now? What do you mainly spend your time on at Salad House?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So I joined on, as we said, 8 years ago, and I was a teacher. I taught fifth grade, taught language arts, math. I was that teacher, if you remember back to your elementary school, that you were stuck in the classroom with the entire day. But I truly had a blast teaching. I have a lot of respect for the profession. And while I was teaching, I got super involved in developing a baseball program. We scaled that baseball program to from one team to hundreds of players, and we traveled up and down the East Coast, and found and that's where I kind of found my passion for business and for branding and for positioning. In growing a business, it's especially in sports like that, where you're doing showcase and travel and those things, you're constantly not only recruiting, but you're also recruiting your own players to stay with you for the next season. And so that's where I really started to hone my interdisciplinary, my communication skills and my ability to multitask. And we're really proud of what we were able to do with that program. And it's funny where things, certain places you go introduce you to other people at different times, as long as you keep your eyes wide open. And Jerry, the chairman of Salad House, who I approached just for some experience and just for a conversation, a beer, so to speak. And because I had started to think about what my career could be, or what a pathway could be for me to further explore my passion for business and branding and storytelling, and all the things that come along with that. And so it just so happened that he was also thinking about making a change. And, his story was he was a partner in a hedge fund, and was talking to Joey about Salad House. And so when he offered me the opportunity to jump on board and start to build Salad House, I was chopping at the bit, chopping, and I dove right in. And, Ben and I actually shared with you this in another conversation. I said to Jerry, I was like, "Hey man, like, I'm just a fifth grade teacher and a baseball coach. What makes you think I could do this?" And so when we think about teachers, teachers are incredibly resourceful, and there is a lot of education practice and programming in franchising. And so I was able to bring that to the team early as well. We make sure that anything that we do when we're trying to educate and onboard franchisees, obviously continuing education, I always make sure that I use my expertise to help us communicate, audit, assess everything that we're doing. So that was really, really exciting. Around that time, we implemented our first POS system, and I spent a lot of time looking at the data, looking at the way the menu performed, and I took a real interest in that and kind of led the charge. And so at one point, when Jerry and I joined Jared and Joey, we actually took data for 6 months, did a deep dive into the menu, and eliminated 40% of it. And as you can imagine, it's just a testament to Joey as a founder. There's not a lot of founders that would allow two outsiders to come in and
Yeah.
audit his company like that. But Joey's, certainly someone who's not only open to change, but also is someone who leans into people's strengths and lets them roll, and so eliminating 40% of the menu was a pretty risky proposition, but we did it for really intentional reasons. Some of it were because of cost of goods. Some of them were just not selling properly. Some of them was for speed. If we knew we were going to build a QSR model, we knew that we had to get ticket times down. And so we made some really tough decisions. And Joey was supportive of all of them, and we really optimized in that way. So that was like really one of the first big projects that I
Yeah.
tackled.
Yeah. I think there's a big benefit there because I went through something similar when I owned Dirty Dough. It wasn't my recipe. And I didn't care if I even liked the cookie. And I think that gave me a big advantage because I'm not the one that's going to buy the cookies to keep the company in business.
Right.
So like I like to like the cookie, but my target demographic was, 25 to 40-year-old women, and they're the ones that's going to rate the cookie. So when you could take the emotion out of the business, out of the product, and just look at the metrics, it allows you to go further faster, I think, because otherwise you're just stuck on an emotional tie and not like, no, this works. And for sure, Joey's like that. He's just like, business hat on. I get this. I love this product, but I get that it has to go for us to scale. And it's working.
And at the
So
time, Bennett, I was really focusing, studying Seth Godin, who is, a lot of people say, is the godfather of marketing, really thoughtful, a real great marketing, a thinker.
mhm.
And he has an expression that we truly do live by here at Salad House. And his, paraphrasing is essentially, don't always try to find more customers for your product. Find more products for your customers. And his thought there is, as you continue to develop more offerings for your current customers, current guests, they'll come back more often and they'll be more apt to tell others about your product. So in that way, it's the same thing, Bennett. We looked at, what do people love here at Salad House? And how can we offer them more of that? And the best example of that is, we didn't have a chicken cutlet sandwich. I know it sounds interesting as a healthy salad brand, but we do sell a lot of sandwiches and wraps. Um, But we created a sandwich called the Sweet Heat, which is right around the time when Mike's Hot Honey was getting really, really popular. And Bennett, this thing shot right to the top. It was like top 4 right off the bat. It was a banger for us. And we all were sitting around the table, and, my family, I have, some Irish blood. They don't like spicy food, but so, I brought some food over, and they're like, "I don't like that too spicy. I don't like that too spicy." And I was just thinking like, "All right, well, it's clearly everyone wants this style of sandwich, but everyone may not want something that's spicy." And so we created a sandwich called the Crispy Mother Clucker, and that sandwich, is a barbecue-based one, and that one actually shot right to the top, and it's usually depending on location, it's a top 3 seller for us. We call them crowd pleasers.
And you had room to add that back to the menu because you'd already cut it and you guys are looking at the menu very objectively, which I love. Um, Now you also oversee marketing, right? You also oversee there's so much marketing that goes into producing, 20 stores that are doing 30 plus million a year. Um, can you walk us through on the marketing? If I am doing my grand opening, maybe we start from there. We have a 1% marketing fee. Most brands are charging 2. Salad House only does 1. Can you talk to me about, I guess, why you guys made that decision to only do 1% and what that 1% is going towards?
Well, we invest a lot on the brand side, and so, when we collect the 1% on the brand side, we're activating and initiating a lot of things for you, for franchisees. And so with that, we're controlling, one thing that we do is, we obviously have social media and we value it and we create tons of content. But our focus with you as being a community-based business with that is to really dive into Facebook groups. And so, we've seen so much success with our ad program that we can make lots of impact with just $5 to $10 a day in um, ad spend because our cost per click is just so low. And so that would be the first step, is just making sure that not only that we're running that when the store opens, but we want to get that open prior. We want to get you launched on those ads prior to open so we can create this waiting room experience, meaning we'll put together really compelling content for you. We will push those ads, make sure that they're running comfortably, maybe 60 days target before the open, and let's collect as many email addresses as possible. Give them a really nice offer. One thing that's super great about Salad House and will always be true is that the food is really good here. And when the food is good, the marketing is a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so we know that if we can just get you a meal, we know that we can convert on that customer or on that guest. And so we want to make sure that we might be a little aggressive early on getting some offers out there, getting some free platters and some caterings out there. But we know that once we get people to taste the food, they're going to come back. And so I guess that doesn't, to circle back to your original question, we want to make sure that we're running really compelling ads. As we move into the market, we give you a really nice opening strategy on Facebook. On the Instagram side, we will make sure that our group um, activates and engages with local community members. Some will call them
Mhm.
influencers, we'll call them ambassadors, people to bring through your pre-opening process. We always like to say at Salad House, there's that song from like Toy Story, you got a friend in me. Not only the franchise, the franchisor is a friend in you, but like the Salad House is a friend, and we're just trying to help you along and make you feel good about your day, accomplish your goals. And so we encourage our franchisees to have really good conversation even before opening with, with community members to get that buy-in so that when they open, they feel like, well, that's my friend. That's my friend they're opening. So what does that look like? Simple advice like if you're going into a market, get your haircut there, do your dry cleaning there, wear your Salad House shirt everywhere. And these are all things that I know you're maybe asking me, how do we spend the money? But these things are free, because you need to get them done anyway. And to your
And
point,
it's the
Bennett,
fun
like,
part of the business too, I think. Like, that's the rewarding part. It seems scary, but every time you have a conversation, even with the cashier checking out of Walmart, right? Like, you feel better after those conversations, and getting into business, especially with food, it's so easy to penetrate the community and have Salad House. sponsor my kids' soccer games and put the logo on the back and bring salads and bring food because food is so community driven.